Ah, time to relax. You know what that means. Glass of wine, your favorite massage chair, and of course, this YouTube video playing on your home television. So go on, indulge yourself. Kick off your shoes, put your feet up, lean back and just enjoy the visuals. Because after all, Japan suits even the savage beast. As you can see, I am clearly not in Texas. I am just outside of Tsuyama, Japan, at one of the most picturesque locations I have ever seen. And actually, that's a lie, because places like this are all over the place in Japan, but you have to get out of the big cities. And, well, that's exactly what happened. A good friend of mine, Eric, who is currently standing behind the camera, told me that he wanted to go to Japan and take a bit of a road trip. So here we are, we rented a car, and we are just absolutely having the time of our lives. But we are deep in the middle of our road trip, and it didn't start here at this unbelievably beautiful place. It started all the way back in Tokyo with some pretty amazing computers. So let's rewind the clock a little bit and take a look at some pretty exciting stuff. We're here at the Math and Science Experience Center at the Tokyo University of Science, and this is a pretty wild place. There's a lot of really epic stuff going on here, but for me to explain it to you would be pointless because I have the most important person here. I have Miss Oishi-san, and she is going to explain to you guys real quick what this place is about. Dozo.
はい、ここは東京理科大学なるほど科学体験館です。デビズさん、今日はようこそありがとうございます。
ありがとうございます。
なるほど科学体験館は大学の中にある博物館、科学館で、1階は数学の展示、2階は科学の展示、そしてこのような計算機がずらりと並んでいます。ぜひ皆さん遊びに来てください。
Yes, so you heard it here first. Please, everybody come check out the Tokyo University of Science Math and Science Experience Center. This place is pretty awesome, and they have some pretty wild machines here, but the ones that I came to see are not actually in this building. I came to see the big, heavy metal. So let's go take a walk over there and check out those big, awesome machines. And here it is, the Bendix G-15. Now this machine is not sitting in here by itself. There's two other absolutely epic machines that we're gonna take a look at in a second. But this is the entire reason that I came to this place. This is awesome. As far as I know, there was only one Bendix G-15 that came to all of Japan, and this is the one. Not only that, this machine was used to calculate the timetables for the 0 series Shinkansen or bullet train. So the timetable between Tokyo and Osaka, this machine was calculating it. So this thing has such a strong intrinsic link to Japanese history. I find it absolutely stunning that it's still here on display at the Tokyo University of Science, and anybody can come see it. They let me come in here and poke all around it. And from a machine standpoint, it's pretty fascinating. This is serial number 45, so it's a really early machine, and it started life as a numeric machine. That means that it couldn't print all of the letters of the alphabet, but it's been modified by Bendix to be an alphanumeric machine. You can see that with the little alpha light that's on the front. On the machines that were sold as alphanumeric machines, they didn't have that little extra metal plate that they bolted in place. So this one started life differently and has become an alphanumeric machine. Now, unfortunately, they don't have the typewriter here, but they do have this really awesome magnetic tape unit. Now, Bob has a couple of these, and I'm gonna try and talk him out of one at some point in time, but the fact that they've got this one here for this machine is pretty wild, and who knows, there could be some specific Japanese train timetable information stored on this tape right here, still on there. A bit of Japanese history could be on this tape. So if we ever get our machine running well enough and the tape running well enough, I may try to get back in touch with the Tokyo University of Science and see if I can borrow this tape and back up the data on it, because this is absolutely irreplaceable. But this machine itself is also not in so rough of shape that I don't think it could come up. All of the wiring on the inside looks to be in really good shape. The drum spins freely. Now, whether it's had a crash or not, I can't confirm. It's missing a few packs, but I think this machine could come up. So absolutely epic to see this thing here. But this is not the only machine in here. Right next to me is also another very special machine. Right next to the Bendix G-15 is this machine. And this is a really kind of insanely special machine for multiple reasons. Did you hear that? It was awful sounding, wasn't it? This happens when you're out filming on the road. Sometimes you think you've got everything set up correctly and you forget to turn on your microphone. So the audio that you were hearing was recorded by the camera only. And by the time that I realized that had happened with that particular shot, I was already several hundred kilometers away from Tokyo. So I couldn't go back and redo the shot. But upon reviewing the footage, I don't know, maybe this is a little bit of a blessing in disguise because that machine is really, really special. It's the Facom 201 and it's a parametron machine. It is a one-of-one machine. And when I tried to explain it in that footage, I totally flubbed the explanation of parametrons. And honestly, that's understandable because they're phenomenally complex designs of how to build complex logic. So essentially what you're doing is you're feeding a frequency into a little transformer, and then you put a capacitor on the other side of that transformer, and it resonates, creating an LC resonance circuit at half the frequency. And then you use this to feed into other parametrons, and you either shift the output frequency by 180 degrees or not. And whether that output frequency is shifted is whether we're producing a 0 or a 1. And so then you can take that shifted frequency, feed it into other parametrons, and create complex combinational logic. Now it is majority logic, so things like AND gates and OR gates are a little easier to build than other more complex stuff. But it's a really brilliant way of building complex logic, and it was designed by an absolute genius, Goto Eiichi, and he came up with this in the 1950s, and the Tokyo University of Science got one of these machines on a grant. And this is the one-of-one that university got all the way back in the 50s. And they got this machine so that people just after the war could start to get hands-on with real deal computers because they realized that that was the future. And they were 100% on the mark. All right, the next shot has real audio, so let's rewind all the way back over to Tokyo and we'll pick up over there. The third large-scale machine that they have in this quite tight spot is this one right here. It's a Remington Rand Univac 120. And this is a really massive, special machine. I've seen a couple of Univacs at some pretty epic museums over the years, but I've never seen an early full vacuum tube Univac. This one is just chock full of surprisingly 7-pin tubes. These all look like maybe little single triodes. Really interesting construction, and they're all in these little plug-in units that pop in one at a time. Now this machine was originally used by a company called Nomura Shoken. Now this is a securities company, and they're actually still around. And because I'm a computer guy and not a business guy, I'm not really sure what a securities company does, but I think it has to do with stocks. They used this to do a ton of really interesting calculations and money stuff. I suppose there's a lot of math involved in that, but all I care about is that it is absolutely stunning. There's this beautiful control panel on the side that's used for diagnostics and whatnot, and then there's a little opening on the front here, and if you stick your head in there, it's like being transported into a completely different world. It looks absolutely stunning in there. Oishi-san, 今日お世話になって本当にありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
新しい友達見つけれましたですね。
ありがとうございました。本当にはるばるアメリカから。
So if you want to come see some really epic stuff, come to the Tokyo University of Science. You can play with a little Aibo as well, but also you can see some pretty awesome heavy metal. But as awesome as this is not the end of our journey. We still have some more stuff to go check out. So I'm gonna hit the road and keep going. Well, the Tokyo University of Science was pretty awesome, and I am so glad we had the opportunity to walk through there and see some of the rarest, coolest machines hanging around in Japan. But while I'm still in Tokyo, well, I'm not in Tokyo right now, but you guys, the viewers, are still in Tokyo. There's one more thing I want to check out, and I got in touch with some local members hanging around Tokyo, and it seems that they're putting on a little bit of a get-together for me. So we're going to go hang out with them and see what kind of cool machines they have. Tokyo is a wonderfully diverse city, and a lovely group of expats from all over get together on the regular to work on and show off their vintage computers. One local member invited me to swing on by and check out the get-together, but Japanese home computers and consoles are very far out of my wheelhouse, so I'll let them take it away from here.
Hello, I'm Sean. I'm from California. Moved to Japan about 15 years ago. This is one of my most recent purchases. It's by Mitsubishi Electric. It's called the Multi-8. It's similar to the more popular computers FM7 and X1. And it has 64K of RAM and displays 8 colors in 640 by 200 pixels. And I've preloaded the demo on here. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and you can see what it looks like.
But I think it actually has some
Here it's cycling through all 8 of its colors. I can imagine the sound is supposed to be waves crashing against the shore. I'm not exactly sure what they intended.
My name's Curt Sampson, and this is a TK85 single board computer with a little hex input and display. This is a later version of the original TK80, which came out in 1975 with an 8080 CPU. NEC released it essentially for engineers to learn how to use that CPU. So this one has a full 2K of memory. Nope, just 1K, I'm sorry. And a full 2K of ROM though. It'll come up. And what we have is this 8-digit display. On the left side it's showing the address, and on the right side it's showing the data value. So if I push the read increment button, or decrement, it'll show us the values in that location. It boots up and starts with the 3E instruction, then a 9.2, and so on and so forth. And you can set any particular address you want by just typing in the address, which will appear on the right, hit address set, and then it moves to the left and shows you the value at that address.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I don't really do much in the way of hardware tinkering or anything. I just bring my MSX every time because I'm a big game collector and I love the MSX. I think it's a really cool system. This is an MSX2 Plus. I've got a Turbo R at home, which is the next step up. One of the things I love about the MSX is just how much homebrew software there is available for it. I think every year we get a good dozen or 2 new games released on cartridge or floppy disk for the MSX that are really high quality. And this is actually a vintage homebrew game from 1997. This is a Japanese homebrew game that utilizes the MSX's FM capabilities and everything. I got it originally because I'm a big fan of the 8-bit era. I grew up with it, and so that was sort of my my golden age of gaming. And we never got MSX in the US, so I thought it was a really interesting sort of wild west of 8-bit gaming.
I'm Sven Simon. I currently work on a mouse adapter for the Commodore 128, PS2 to the usual DB9. I hand wired the whole thing, and I'm currently troubleshooting to see if anything actually comes out before I just plug it into the machine. I designed the PCB as well, although I already hand wired the whole thing.
That's very cool. So do you have a Commodore 128 that you're building this for?
That was my very first system as a kid, and finally got myself another one again. And trying to get it to work the way it used to back in the days,
Okay, hi, my name is Michelle Belmont, and today I'm working on one of my PC-98 machines. This is a PC-9801BX, which is a 486 model. And we've got some issues with it. This machine has an internal 3.5-inch floppy drive. and an external 5 1/4 inch floppy drive. We also have a compact flash adapter in here, so that acts as an ID hard drive. And there's our problem. So these pink blocks here in the background are not supposed to be there. It's supposed to be clouds. And so we're trying to just figure out what the problem is and how to fix it.
Well, that was pretty awesome hanging out in Tokyo with all those wonderful people, but we have a lot more traveling to do, as these deers can attest to. Before we get here though, we've got to go to Nagoya. I've got friends and family that live in Nagoya. All right. I know that you really want one, man. Here you go, you can have a little bit of that one too. I've got friends and family that live in Nagoya, so I'm gonna go visit them and have a wonderful time. So me and my buddy Eric will hop on the Shinkansen, the bullet train, and blast our way down to Nagoya. I know you want one, there you go. We'll visit friends and family, and then we're also gonna go through and do a lot of shopping at little places called Hard Off, which are these amazing used stores that you can do some pretty epic thrifting at. So while you guys are watching that, I'm gonna continue playing with these awesome deer. Hard Off is a chain of secondhand stores that is a must stop for anyone traveling to Japan. Each Hard Off is wildly different, as their inventory is dependent on who brings what in. So hitting multiple Hard Offs, hunting for that perfect deal is definitely recommended. These shots here are from about 4 different Hard Offs we hit throughout Nagoya, and you can find all manner of goodies like a stunning amount of console games, as well as the consoles to play them on. Like this new Famicom for 16,500 yen, which at the time of filming is $107 US. A little pricey, but looking around, here are 2 more Famicoms still in their original boxes for $42 and $50 US respectively. Now they are labeled as junk, which means they're untested. Still, that's a pretty righteous deal. Right next to those were 2 Super Famicoms, also still in their original boxes, for just $50 and $57 US respectively. That's a pretty solid deal in my book, if I didn't already have both a Famicom and Super Famicom at home, that is. However, if that's still too rich, hunt around and you can often find little gems like this, a Famicom hiding out under an N64 for just $10 US. A little cleaning and maybe some internal work and that would be a steal. Here's one that I nearly snatched up, a Famicom disk system for just 4,400 yen or $28 US. Digging around, I also came across this wild Super Famicom travel box thing. I'd never seen one of these before. Stepping out of the world of Nintendo, this NEC interface unit was very cool. This is a special dock that connects the NEC PC engine to a CD-ROM unit. Or how about this Sega Mega Drive for just $35 US? And here's another one I'd never seen before, a Pioneer PX V60, an early Z80-based MX1 system with dual cartridge slots. If it had been a little cheaper, I'd have been tempted to snag this one. But it's not all gaming consoles. There's so much more at Hard Off, like this Akai CR81D 8-track player that is absolutely stunning, or this triplet of rack mount equalizers, each for a ridiculously cheap $21 US. This Technics cassette player was a little pricier at $85 US, but it was still very epic. I also have a soft spot for typewriters, and this Brother Valiant 713 was extremely tempting, especially considering it was just $3 US. That's practically free. Word processors also scratch that same itch, and this Fujitsu Oasis was properly cool. I would love to see just how capable it was, considering the complexity of the Japanese writing system. And coming out of left field was this trio of intercom system microphones. I would have zero use for these, but that doesn't make them any less cool. What I would have use for, though, is more vacuum tubes. And of course, one of the Hard Offs we went to just had them hanging around in bins. They even had this awesome collection of tubes still in their original boxes, which makes sense considering you can find all manner of vacuum tube amps and radios like this National for just $57 US. But the one that caught me most off guard was this 1U server, a proper Dell PowerEdge 860. I've been wanting to play around with a 1U server for a while now, and the temptation to grab this one was strong considering it was just $71 US. And it looked to be complete except for the hard drives. I just didn't know how I would be able to get it home is all. So what was my haul from all of this insane thrifting that we just did? Well, the most important thing was that I needed a new tripod because the tripod that I brought with me actually broke. I've been using that one for like 10 years as my travel tripod, and it finally gave up the ghost. So I hunted through all the different hard offs that we went to, and I got the tripod that is not in this shot because it's currently holding up the camera that I'm using to film this. It's a nice silk tripod. I think it cost about $40, and it was really fantastic. Aside from that, I picked up these two little vacuum tubes. These are proper Toshiba made 6AU6 tubes. I love the 6AU6 vacuum tube. It's just a fantastic tube, so I had to get some that were proper Japanese tubes in proper Japanese boxes. I also picked up this little tape measure. I needed a tape measure to make sure that the tripod that I was going to buy was going to fit in my luggage, and this one was just hanging about. It was like $1, and I always try to pick up a metric tape measure every time that I'm in Japan, and this one looked really cool as well, so I just brought it home with me. But there is one big elephant in the room, and that is this absolutely stunning calculator that I've been using as an armrest while I film this bit. This is a Casio ASA, and it was at the last hard off that we went to. That's right, you can find ridiculous stuff like this at hard offs, although it is a little rare. This is a full-fledged NEC tube calculator from 1969, and a good friend of mine, Commodore Z, actually recognized it. I think this had been rebadged by Commodore and sold in the US as a Commodore calculator, which is absolutely wild. But this is the proper Japanese-made one. It's set up for AC 100 volts, and it doesn't work. We plugged it in, and the NEC tubes flicker a little bit of life, so the tubes are at least good, but there's a logic fault going on somewhere inside of it. So we're gonna have a really big, heavy deep dive into this calculator, try and get it up and going in a future episode. So we've got some proper logic and tube nonsense coming in the future. But here's the thing. There's so much more to Japan than just cool old computers and wild, weird tech in Akihabara, like these Makidou Caves that are outside of Okayama. Japan is one of the most beautiful, stunning countries I've ever been to in my life, and I got a lot more exploring to do, so, well, we're gonna start right here in this cave because this is epic. The Makidou Caves are located just outside of Matsuyama, which is in the Okayama prefecture. It was supposedly discovered accidentally by a hunter during the Edo period. It's relatively flat inside and only about 450 meters in length, which makes it perfect for exploring. In 1957, it was designated a natural monument and open to the public, and in 2015, the LED lighting that you've been seeing in these shots was installed. The wildest thing, though, is that it has a full-on lake inside of it, with bridges to walk across it. Emerging from the cave, we took off through the sleepy village around it, and accidentally stumbled across Bihoku Circuit. This is a small racetrack, surprisingly close to the caves. There were about 10 cars out on track that day, and the first that caught our eye was this wild S2000. It was the loudest S2000 I've ever heard in my life. But there was so much more on display, like this epic Toyota Chaser. The car was lightly modified with mostly bolt-ons, and the owner even did the paint job himself. Out on track, the 1JZ was more than enough to get big smoky drifts out of it. But the real star of the show for me was this fairly benign looking S15. The engine was totally stock. He just had a good set of coilovers, tires, and impeccable tuning. He was also kind enough to give us a quick ride around the track in it, and he wasn't holding back at all. The car was so smooth, and the driver could link drifts using just the side brake and shifting the weight around. No clutch kicking or mechanically brutal techniques in use here. Riding with him was an absolute pleasure and one of the biggest highlights of the entire trip. After that, we hopped back into our Toyota Yaris rental car and set off for Okayama City. We took turns driving because the roads in Japan are an absolutely joy to blast down, and once we arrived in Okayama, it was time to hunt down some food, and I just had to check out Babyface Planets. The food selection, though, is pretty typical of a family restaurant, and we both opted for some amazing omurice. The next morning, we set out into the Kurashiki Bikan historical quarter of Okayama City. This entire section of town is filled with traditional buildings painted white with black roof tiles. There's a canal that runs through the center of the area that is framed with willow trees and filled with koi fish. One of my favorite aspects of the area is that they went to great lengths to hide all electricity. There are no electric poles or wires, and everything is underground or hidden cleverly. So the entire district looks and feels just like it came straight out of the 19th century. But a trip to Japan wouldn't be complete without a typical Japanese morning service. A bit of thick toast and a hard-boiled egg with some tea. We then headed south out of Okayama into Fukuyama to see the Fukuyama Auto and Clock Museum. As the name implies, this museum is full of gorgeous cars and clocks. And anything that is unlocked you can actually sit in, which was really awesome. They even had an old airplane that you could climb up to and sit in as well. The ailerons were disconnected, but the elevators and rudder were still hooked up. The cars on display were eclectic and beautiful, like this collection of early Nissan Bluebirds, or this hilarious three-wheeler. This Mitsubishi Minica caught my eye because I happen to own the van version of it, and I always love seeing a Mazda R360 hanging about. Also, I don't think I've ever seen Eric more at home than he was sitting on this beast. But there was so much more at this museum than just cars and clocks, like this epic row of vintage televisions. Remember when TVs were considered furniture and each had a unique style? Sure, the screens weren't 85 inches, but I just can't get over how beautiful all these were. Just look at the front of this Toshiba. Pure art. There was also an epic collection of radios on display, and even some vintage calculators. It was a joy to see someone else proudly displaying a collection of early digital calculators. And someday I will get my hands on one of these mechanical Japanese typewriters. Of course, it wouldn't be a Japanese museum without a little pachinko. And there was even some early film projectors on display, as well as the prettiest payphone I've ever seen. After we finished up at the museum, we set off for Matsuyama City on the island of Shikoku. To get there, we had to hop on the highway and island hop across 6 different islands, each one connected with a stunning bridge. Once in the city of Matsuyama, we pulled up to our hotel, the Takanokono Hotel on the outskirts of the city. We chose this particular hotel because the owner is also a racing driver and had some of his personal motorcycle collection on display. He had BMWs and Ducatis, but the real star of the show for me was the Honda NR. This bike uses a V4 engine, but it has super wide oval pistons with dual connecting rods per piston and 8 valves per cylinder. One of the most insane engine designs ever put into production, and with only 300 ever produced, seeing one in person is a proper treat. The next morning we headed south out of Matsuyama down to Oda Miyama Gorge. This is a small little hiking trail along a beautiful gorge in the middle of the mountains. It's quite a challenge to get to, and as such, tourists rarely make it out this way, it seems. It was positively deserted when we arrived, giving us the most serene and beautiful views of nature you could ever hope for. The river slices right through the mountains, and the water was just perfectly crystal clear. The walking trails dive through the wilderness and mostly parallel the water. It's such a ridiculously picturesque location that to my Texan eyes, it almost looked fake, like a Bob Ross painting come to life. It was just perfect view after perfect view. Like I said though, it was a challenge to get to and from. The roads were barely wide enough for a single Yaris, yet they were actually two-way roads. It's worth the harrowing drive though. After Oda Miyama, we headed east over to another gorge called Nakatsu Gorge. Access to this one is far easier and it's a much more popular location. As such, there were many more tourists, both Japanese and foreign alike. That, of course, didn't make it any less beautiful. The water here was also just insanely clear and blue, and the walkways and paths through the gorge were just as picturesque as could be. They varied from narrow passageway lined with Buddhas to wide open stone walkways over the water with silly Americans walking across them. The real party piece though was this stunning waterfall. It was just absolutely breathtaking and a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The next day we loaded up and headed north to the island of Awajishima to check out the Awajishima Monkey Center. This was one of those places that took a solid 30 minutes for my brain to parse. The monkeys here are not in cages. They're not hemmed in any way. They are absolutely free to come and go as they please or just disappear into the mountains. It's 100% their world and we were just passing through. Also, there were just wild deer roaming around too, which led to hilarious situations such as the deer and monkeys working together. One monkey would pull down a weighted feeder on a chain so the deer could eat from it. And supposedly the monkeys sometimes even jump on the backs of the deer to go for a ride. There is a designated feeding time and it's an absolute trip to watch. The monkeys come out of the trees and from all over to swarm the main building. And there they throw out the food. It's hilarious to see the monkeys jump up for it. This place was an absolute mind-blowing trip and could only exist in a place like Japan where the people have an unbreakable sense of respect for each other. And while monkeys are awesome, I personally love deer, so we had to swing by Nara Koen just outside of Osaka to see the deer park. Like the Monkey Center, these deer are free to roam and there are no fences or cages or anything. They can come and go as they please, but they also know that tourists will buy shika senbei or deer snacks. The deer will often mock bow asking for the snacks, and while this may seem adorable and cute at first, if you don't pay out, they absolutely will headbutt you or bite your clothes. They can be a little ornery, but for the most part, they go about their daily business and you can just enjoy the views of these beautiful creatures. Now, Nara Koen is a major tourist destination, with tour buses bringing tons of people. I would suggest getting there as early as possible to avoid the crowds. The deer tend to move deeper into the park as more people show up, so getting there before the buses means that you can see many more deer and maybe even see some baby deer wandering about as well. How do you sum up a trip like this when you have views like this behind you? Breathtaking, awe-inspiring, life-changing. I don't know, you can't sum it up. This has just been an unbelievable trip and I've had the absolute time of my life. And we still got a few days left, but for those few days, I think I'm gonna turn the camera off and just enjoy the good vibes. So I wanna thank you all so much for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.